Welcome back to Reformed Thinking. Today we have a topic that I think genuinely keeps people up at night. It's the elephant in the room, or maybe I should say the elephant in the pew. We are taking a serious, hard look at the parable of the weeds from Matthew chapter 13.
It is a text that addresses what we might call a scandal. And I don't use that word lightly. It is the scandal of the mixed field.
Yeah, let's just get right into it. It's that tension we all feel. If you've been a Christian for more than, I don't know, about 5 minutes, you feel it.
Oh, for sure.
We believe Jesus is king. We believe the kingdom has come. We have this theology of victory and sovereignty. And yet we look around the world, or worse, we look inside the church, and it is a wreck.
It is messy.
It is really messy. There is evil right alongside the good. There are scandals. There are hypocrites. There are people who say one thing on Sunday and do the exact opposite on Monday.
Right.
And the question that naturally bubbles up is, if Jesus is in charge, why does it look like this? Does something go wrong?
That is the core tension. And usually when people face that contradiction, the perfect king versus the messy church, they tend to fall into one of 3 reactions.
Yeah.
And honestly, none of them are healthy.
I can guess a few of them. The first one has to be despair, right? You see the mess, you see the pastor on the news for embezzlement, and you just think, well, it's all fake.
Precisely. That is the reaction of the cynic. They see the weeds and conclude that the wheat isn't real either. Or they decide that the gospel doesn't actually have the power to change lives because, look at these people.
It's a total collapse of hope.
It is. But the second reaction is the opposite. It is severity. It is a kind of hyper-zeal.
Burn it all down approach.
In a way, it is the person who wants to grab a weed whacker or a flamethrower and immediately purge everyone who looks even slightly suspicious.
Right.
It is the desire for a pure church right now, by human force. You see this on social media all the time.
Yeah.
The hunting for heretics, the obsession with rooting out anyone who steps out of line.
It feels good, though. It feels righteous.
It feels incredibly righteous. That's why it's so dangerous. And then the third reaction.
Permissiveness.
Right. This is the person who looks at the mess, shrugs, and says, well, nobody's perfect. We're all just messy people loving Jesus. And they use the mixture as an excuse to tolerate sin.
They normalize the evil.
They do. They stop calling weeds weeds and just call them alternative floras.
So our mission today, as we go through this stack of sources, is to see how Jesus rejects all 3 of those options. He doesn't want us to despair, he doesn't want us to start a holy war, and he certainly doesn't want us to just pretend the weeds aren't there.
No.
He offers something else.
He offers a doctrine of sovereign patience. And to get there, we're going to look at the text as Matthew 13, but we're also going to dig into some fascinating historical context regarding Roman agriculture, which is way more intense than you'd think.
It really is.
And, of course, the theological framework of the Westminster Confession regarding providence.
I was reading through the notes on the Roman agriculture stuff, and my jaw dropped. It changes how you read the whole story. But let's start at the beginning. Matthew 13, verses 24 and 25. The parable of the sower has just happened, and now Jesus shifts gears. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field.
Right off the bat, we have to pause on the setup, because every word here is doing work. Jesus establishes the king's claim.
Okay.
The text says he sowed kailon sperma good seed, and he did it onto agros otu, in his field.
His field. That possessive pronoun seems to be doing a lot of heavy lifting there.
It is huge. It tells us that the field isn't a public park. It isn't an abandoned lot or a commons where anyone can plant whatever they want. It belongs to the master by right.
So from the very first sentence, we know who is in charge.
Yes. So when we see what happens later, the weeds and the chaos, we have to remember that the territory itself is not in question. The kingdom is not an experiment that might fail. It is a rightful administration of the king's property.
And the seed is good. I think that is important because when things go wrong later, our instinct is to blame the materials. We think maybe the gospel wasn't presented right, or maybe the church structure is flawed.
Sure, or maybe the people weren't good enough.
Right. But Jesus starts by saying, no, the seed was good.
And this touches on a vital piece of Reformed theology. The good seed represents the sons of the kingdom, as Jesus explains later. They are wheat because the master planted them.
Not because they planted themselves.
They didn't plant themselves.
Wait, hold on. This sounds like that theological concept, what's the word, where it's all one-sided.
You're thinking of monergism.
Monergism. That's it. Break that down for a second in this context.
So mono means one, ergon means work.
Mm-hmm.
Monergism is the teaching that regeneration, the starting of spiritual life, is the work of God alone.
Okay.
In the parable, the wheat doesn't decide to be wheat. It doesn't cultivate itself. It is wheat because the sower put it there. Grace initiates life.
So before the trouble starts, the parable anchors us in this reality. God is the actor, the field is his, and the seed is good.
It's the foundation. Everything else is built on that.
Okay, so we have the baseline. God is good, the seed is good, the field is his. But then, the plot twist, verse 25. But while men were sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away.
The disruption.
Now, I have to ask about the sleeping part. While men were sleeping, is Jesus taking a jab at the disciples here? Is he saying, if you guys had just stayed awake and prayed more, we wouldn't have this mess? Because that's how I've heard it preached before. Like, the church fell asleep, and that's why the culture is bad.
That is a very common reading, especially in revivalist circles. But if we look at the grammar and the context, it is probably not a rebuke of sin.
Oh, really?
Think about it. Sleep is a natural necessity. Humans have to sleep. Farmers have to sleep. If you don't sleep, you die.
So the farmer wasn't being negligent.
No. The sleeping men here likely represent human finitude. We cannot be vigilant 24 hours a day. We have limits. We are creatures.
So it is not necessarily that they were lazy, it is that they were human. And the enemy exploits that.
Exactly. The enemy strikes when the church is in its natural rhythms, perhaps comfortable, perhaps just resting. It highlights that the enemy is an opportunist. He works in the dark.
He doesn't come at high noon when everyone is watching.
No. And speaking of the enemy working, this is where we get to the crime. The sources point out that what the enemy did here wasn't just a random act of vandalism.
Right.
It wasn't just some kids throwing seeds over a fence. It was a specific legal crime called superseminatio.
Superseminatio. Okay, I've never heard that word before.
Yes, in Roman law and in the ancient Near East generally, this was a known codified crime.
Huh?
It was malicious oversowing.
Malicious.
You would take your enemy's field, which had already been plowed, fertilized, and sown with weed. So they'd done all the hard work. And you would sneak in at night and sow weeds right on top of it.
That is so petty.
It is incredibly petty, but it's also devastating. It destroys the livelihood of the farmer. It was such a problem that Roman jurists actually had to write specific laws about how to handle the damages.
Wow.
It wasn't a prank. It was economic warfare.
It feels very personal.
It is personal, and that connects to the theology here. The parable implies that evil in the world and in the church is not just an accident. Liberal theology sometimes suggests that evil is just a lack of education or a bad environment. If we just fix the social structures, if we just fund the schools better, people will be good.
Like we're just blank slates that got a little dusty.
Right. But this parable says, no, there is an enemy. There is active, personal, demonic sabotage at work. The weeds are there because someone intended them to be there to ruin the harvest.
So it's deliberate.
It is personal malice.
That actually makes it scarier. It's not just entropy, it's sabotage.
Correct. We are in a conflict.
Let's talk about the weapon of choice here. The weed. The text calls it zizania. Now, I grew up weeding gardens. Usually you can tell what a weed is. It looks different. It has big, ugly leaves or thorns.
Right. It stands out.
But the sources say zizania isn't your average dandelion.
No. It is almost certainly what is known as bearded darnel, or Lolium temulentum. And here is the kicker, and this is why the Roman farmers hated it so much.
Yeah.
In the early stages of growth, before the grain heads appear, darnel looks almost identical to wheat.
Identical. Like you couldn't tell them apart.
Unless you were a highly trained botanist with a magnifying glass, probably not.
Yeah.
Botanically, the blade structure, the color, the way it shoots up, it is a mimic.
It's a counterfeit.
It's a counterfeit.
That changes the whole vibe of the story. The enemy didn't sow thorns or thistles.
No.
If I walk into a wheat field and see a big thorny bush, I know it doesn't belong there. I can chop it down. I don't feel bad about it.
Exactly. But if the enemy sows a plant that mimics the wheat, you have a crisis of identification. And think about the theological application here. Satan doesn't usually sow people into the church who are wearing signs that say, I hate God, or I am here to destroy you.
Right. He sows people who look like Christians.
They look like us. They talk like us. They use the right vocabulary. They know the words covenant and justification. They raise their hands during the songs.
They put money in the offering plate.
They might even be leaders. They are false brethren. They are visually indistinguishable from the elect for a certain period of time.
That is terrifying, actually. It means the person sitting next to me in the pew could be Zizania. Or, could I be? No, let's not spiral yet.
Well, it's a sobering thought.
But the sources mention something else about darnel that I found fascinating. It is not just that it takes up space, it's actually dangerous to eat, right?
Yes. This is the nasty secret of Lolium temulentum. The plant itself is bad enough, but it is often infected with a fungus called ergot.
Ergot.
If you grind that up with the wheat and bake it into bread, it is toxic. In the ancient world, they called it drunken wheat because it caused dizziness, nausea, and hallucinations.
Hallucinations.
Severe ones. In fact, some historians have linked ergot poisoning to events like the Salem witch trials or the Great Fear in France. People would eat contaminated bread and start seeing things, convulsing, or acting paranoid.
That's incredible. So the enemy isn't just trying to crowd out the wheat, he is trying to poison the community.
That is the danger of false brethren and false teaching. It intoxicates the church. It makes the community dizzy. Think about when bad doctrine sweeps through a church. People stop thinking clearly. They get confused. They get spiritual nausea. It isn't benign. It's a hallucinogen.
That is such a vivid image. Drunken wheat. It explains so much about how chaotic church splits can feel. Everyone acting irrational.
Exactly. It's poison.
So we have the field, the good seed, the enemy, and this mimic weed. Then comes the next beat in the story, the crisis of observation. Verse 26 says, "So when the plants came up and bore grain, then the weeds appeared also."
This is the principle of delayed clarity.
Delayed clarity. I like that.
The mixture was there the whole time. The roots were going down, the stalks were going up.
Yeah.
But it wasn't visible until the fruit came.
Fruit reveals the nature of the tree.
Exactly. You can fake the blade, you can fake the stalk, but you cannot fake the grain. Wheat produces a head of grain that bows over when it's ripe. Darnel stands straight up and has these black seeds.
So time tells the story.
Time is the necessary tool for discernment. You can't rush it. And when that distinction finally becomes visible, when the hypocrisy breaks the surface, it shocks the servants.
They freak out. I love this part because it feels so modern. In verse 27, they run to the master and say, "Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then does it have weeds?"
Listen to the tone of that question. It borders on an accusation.
It does. It sounds like you said you handled this. You said you bought the premium seed. What did you do wrong? Did you cheap out on us?
It is the psychological instinct to blame providence. God, if you are good and if you are all-powerful, why is this mess here?
We do that all the time.
We see this in the church whenever a major scandal breaks. When a famous leader falls, people immediately start questioning the foundations. Is the gospel true? Is God actually in control? Why did God let him get away with it for so long?
And immediately after the accusation, they move to a solution. They don't even wait for an answer, really. Verse 28, "Do you want us to go and gather them?"
There it is, the instinct for control.
Let me fix it. Let me get in there and rip this out right now.
It is the temptation of the holy war. It is the desire to purge the evil now. And notice the assumption the servants are making.
What's that?
They assume two things. First, they assume they are competent to do it.
They assume they can tell the difference perfectly.
Right. They see a few weeds and think, I know exactly who is who. And second, they assume they can remove the weed without hurting the wheat. They're driven by zeal, but it is a zeal without knowledge. They want a clean field, and they want it immediately. They can't stand the tension of the mixture.
I feel that, though. I think we all feel that. When you see injustice or hypocrisy in the church, you want it gone. You want to be the one to say, get out.
Of course.
It feels righteous. It feels like you're defending God's honor.
It feels incredibly righteous. That is why it is such a dangerous temptation. It masquerades as holiness. I am just being zealous for the Lord. But the master sees it differently.
He sees the bigger picture.
He sees it as reckless.
That brings us to the master's prohibition. Verse 29, he says, "No." Just a flat no. Lest in gathering the weeds, you root up the wheat along with them.
This is the agricultural reality clashing with the servant's zeal. We have to visualize the soil here. Below the surface, the roots of the darnel and the roots of the wheat are intertwined.
They're tangled.
They are tangled together. It's a mess down there. You cannot rip one up without tearing the roots of the other.
So the master's saying, I care more about protecting the wheat than I do about immediately destroying the weeds.
That is the heart of it. It is a pastoral wisdom. Think about what this means for the church. There are people in the church who are immature Christians. They might look a bit messy. They might be struggling with sin. They might have bad theology on some points. To a zealous, judgmental eye, they might look like weeds.
The bruised reed.
Exactly. If you create a church culture that is obsessed with purging and hunting down hypocrites, you are going to crush those tender believers.
Yes.
You are going to rip them up.
You'll create an environment of fear where no one can admit they are struggling.
You will.
This reminds me of the historical warning in the sources about the Donatists. I feel like we can't talk about this parable without talking about them. Can you unpack that whole situation for us? Who were these guys?
So we have to go back to North Africa in the 4th and 5th centuries. This was after the great persecutions by the Roman Empire. Under Emperor Diocletian, the persecution was brutal. And the authorities had a specific tactic. They would demand that Christian leaders hand over their copies of the scriptures to be burned.
Burn the books. A classic move.
Right. And if you handed them over, you were called a traditor, which is where we get the word traitor. It means one who hands over.
Okay.
Now, after the persecution ended, the church had a problem. Some bishops and priests had cracked under the pressure. They had handed over the books. Now they wanted to come back. They wanted to lead services again.
And I assume some people weren't cool with that.
The Donatists were definitely not cool with that. They were the rigorists. They said, no, if you were a traditor, you are out. You are a weed.
A permanent weed.
And furthermore, and this is the key point, if a traditor baptized you, your baptism doesn't count. If he gave you communion, it wasn't the body and blood of Christ.
Wow. So they believed the validity of the sacrament depended on the purity of the priest.
Exactly.
Right.
They wanted a pure church. They wanted a field with zero weeds. They said the true church cannot coexist with these traitors.
And St. Augustine, he stepped into this ring, right?
Augustine was the heavyweight champion here. He argued against the Donatists using this very logic from Matthew 13. He argued for the corpus permixtum, the mixed body.
The mixed body.
He said that until the end of the age, the visible church will contain both wheat and weeds.
He wasn't saying the traditors did a good thing, though?
No, of course not. He wasn't excusing the sin, but he was saying that the validity of the church comes from Christ, not from the moral perfection of the human ministers.
Right.
If you try to separate the weeds by human force before the harvest, you destroy the church. You end up with a schism. And that's what happened. The Donatists split off and became this angry, isolated sect that eventually withered away.
And usually the people doing the purging turn out to be not so great themselves. There is a bit of irony there.
History bears that out. When you try to usurp the role of the angels, you usually end up acting like a devil. You become hard, unloving, and proud, which is, ironically, very weed-like behavior.
So we have the prohibition, don't rip them up. But then what do? We just sit there. We come to the theology of the interval.
The command is, let both grow together until the harvest.
Let both grow. This is the doctrine of providence again, specifically from the Westminster Confession, chapter 5. God permits the tares. He isn't the author of evil. Remember, an enemy did this. But he sovereignly permits it to remain for a time.
Why? That's the question. Why let the poison grow next to the food?
For his own glory, and for the testing and sanctification of the wheat. Living alongside the weeds forces the wheat to stand firm against the wind. It forces the wheat to rely on the sower.
If the field was perfect, we might forget we need grace.
We might. The friction of the mixed field actually strengthens the true believers.
This brings up a really important distinction you mentioned earlier.
Yeah?
The visible church versus the invisible church. I feel like this is a concept that solves a lot of headaches if you really get it.
It is essential. This is classic Reformed ecclesiology. The visible church is everyone you can see on Sunday morning.
It includes everyone who is on the membership roll, everyone who professes faith, and their children. But we know, based on this parable, that the visible church contains both wheat and tares. It is a mixed bag.
And the invisible church.
The invisible church is the elect. It is the people who are truly regenerated, who have true faith, known only to God.
Known only to God.
That is the key. The mistake the servants and the Donatists make is trying to force the visible church to be identical to the invisible church right now. They want to look at the crowd and say, I know for a fact 100% of you are saved.
They want to see the roots. But we don't have X-ray vision.
We lack omniscience. We cannot see the heart. We can see actions. We can see confessions. But we cannot see the secret standing of a soul before God.
Now, I have to play devil's advocate here. Or maybe just voice the concern of the zealous listener who is shouting at their phone right now.
Go for it.
If we say let both grow, does that mean we just tolerate everything? Does that mean if there's a guy in the church who is openly embezzling money or sleeping around. We just say, well, wheat and tares, brother, let's grow together, because that sounds like a disaster.
Absolutely not. And I'm glad you brought that up because that is the danger of the permissive reaction we talked about earlier. The sources are very emphatic on this. This parable is not a prohibition against church discipline.
Okay, explain the difference. How do those two things work together?
We have other texts for discipline. 1 Corinthians 5, for example, tells us to remove the wicked man from among us when there is open, unrepentant, scandalous sin.
Purge the evil person from among you. So how do we square let them grow with purge the evil person?
The difference is the scope and the finality. Church discipline is about judging fruit outward actions that are clear and unrepentant. It is a remedial measure.
Remedial.
We put someone out of the fellowship to bring them to repentance or to protect the flock from immediate harm. It's like a quarantine.
But it's not a death sentence.
Exactly. Uprooting the tares in the parable refers to a final judgmental separation, trying to determine someone's eternal destiny and cast them out of the kingdom entirely.
Right.
When we discipline someone, we aren't saying, you are definitely going to hell. We are saying, your life right now does not match your confession, and you cannot come to the Lord's table until you repent.
That makes sense. We can say, you can't be a member right now, but we can't say, we know God hates you.
Right. We can judge conduct. We cannot judge the heart's final state. Also remember, a botanical weed can never change into wheat.
Yeah, that's a good point.
A dandelion's always a dandelion.
Yeah.
But a human weed, a person who is currently in sin or unbelief, can be converted.
That's a huge point.
If you uproot them and kick them out of the sphere of the gospel, if you totally shun them, you might be cutting them off from the very thing that could save them. Augustine made this point too. We tolerate the mixture because today's weed might be tomorrow's wheat.
So this letting grow isn't permissiveness, it is eschatological patience.
It is living in the tension of the already not yet. The kingdom is here, but the consummation is not.
And it's restraint.
It is restraint. It means the church does not use the sword. We don't use civil force to cleanse the world of unbelievers. We don't launch inquisitions.
But this interval doesn't last forever. The clock is ticking. That brings us to the harvest. The text says, until the harvest.
That until is the most ominous word in the parable for the weed and the most hopeful word for the wheat. The mixture is temporary. The mess is not eternal.
And who are the reapers?
Verse 30 tells us clearly, and Jesus explains it later. The reapers are angels.
Got us.
Not us, not the pastor, not the session, not the most pious guy in the church. Angels. This is a crucial distinction. We are witnesses. They are the executioners.
So we don't have the job description for that.
No. God has a specialized team for the final separation, and we are not on it. Angels have a perception that we lack. They act on the direct command of the Son of Man.
And there are two destinies. Let's look at the first one, the fire.
Gather the weeds first and bind them in bundle to be burned. It is a stark image. It is a distinct rejection of modern sentimentality or universalism.
Yeah, you hear people say, well, in the end, God is love, so he will just hug everyone and it will be fine. The weeds will just turn into flowers.
Jesus doesn't say that here. He speaks of a furnace of fire, of weeping and gnashing of teeth. The judgment is real. It is personal, and it is terrible.
It's final.
The tares, the sons of the evil one, face a definitive rejection. They are removed from the kingdom.
It's interesting that they are gathered into bundles. It's like they are grouped together in their rebellion.
It creates a sense of finality.
Yeah.
They're bound.
Yeah.
They can no longer mimic the wheat. The masquerade is over.
But then the barn.
But gather the wheat into my barn.
I love that image. A barn is safe. It is dry. It is where you put the things you value. It implies protection from the elements.
It is a picture of homecoming and security. And notice again the possessive, my barn. Just like it was his field, it is his barn. The master knows his own. And here is the assurance. Not one grain of wheat is lost. Even if that wheat was growing right next to a toxic weed, even if its roots were tangled, even if it was bruised and bent by the wind, if it is wheat, it makes it to the barn. The reapers don't miss any.
The sources mention verse 43 in this context. Then the righteous will shine like the sun.
That is the gospel connection. Why do they shine? Not because they were shinier than the weeds on their own merits, remember? They looked identical for a long time.
Right.
They shine because they have the imputed righteousness of Christ. They are the sons of the kingdom. Christ is the sower, and he's the Lord of the harvest. He starts the work, and he finishes it.
So what does this all mean for us today? We have walked through the text, the history, the weird botany, the theology. Now we need to land the plane. Let's talk to the different listeners out there.
Okay.
First, the zealous listener, the one who is really frustrated with the state of the church, who just wants to clean house.
To the zealous listener, the text says, repent of the desire to play God. That is a hard word, but it is necessary. Stop trying to fix the church by hunting down every hypocrite. Recognize that your desire for immediate purity might actually be an idol of control. You want to be the king, but there is only one king.
And you're not him.
And you're not him. And realize that purity culture, when it becomes harsh and suspicious, often hurts the weak. It tramples the wheat. Put down the scythe. It's not your tool.
That is hard to hear, but necessary. What about the cynical listener, the one who has been burned by church hurt, or who reads the news about the scandals and thinks, it's all a sham?
To the cynic, the text says, don't be shocked. Jesus predicted this. He told us 2,000 years ago that the field would look like this.
It's not a bug, it's a feature of this age.
Exactly. The presence of weeds doesn't mean the master has lost control. It means the enemy is active, but the master is patient. Don't let the hypocrites drive you away from the sower. The wheat is real, even if the weeds are loud.
That is a good line. The wheat is real, even if the weeds are loud. Because the weeds are loud, they take up all the oxygen in the room.
They do, but the barn is waiting for the wheat.
And for the fearful listener, maybe the person who worries, am I a weed? Is the church going to survive? Is everything going to fall apart?
Take comfort.
Yeah.
The master is protecting the wheat. The only reason the reapers haven't come yet is because he is waiting for the full harvest. His patience is salvation. He knows you. If you trust in Christ, you are his wheat, and you will be gathered into his barn. You are secure, not because of your perfection, but because of his ownership.
And finally, evangelism. This parable actually changes how we view evangelism, doesn't it?
It does. It shifts us from a war footing to a mission footing. Since we cannot uproot the tares, our only option is to evangelize them.
Okay.
As I mentioned, a botanical weed can't change, but a spiritual weed, a human being, can be transformed by the gospel. We live among them, we grow among them, and we bear witness to them, praying that the Spirit turns tares into wheat before the harvest comes.
That is a powerful perspective. Instead of seeing the world or the fake Christians as enemies to be destroyed, we see them as a mission field.
We do.
We are planted next to them for a reason.
Exactly. The field is the world. We are planted here to shine.
Well, we have covered a massive amount of ground. We have gone from Roman agricultural crimes to the end of the age. As we wrap up this deep dive into the parable of the weeds, what is the big takeaway?
The summary is this. We need to have eyes of faith regarding the messiness of the world. We need to trust the sower's goodness and the king's timing. We are not the judges, we are the crop. Our job is to grow, to bear fruit, and to endure with patience.
And I want to leave our listeners with a final provocative thought, something that wasn't explicitly in the discussion, but lingers around the edges. We have been talking about wheat and weeds as these fixed categories in the story. But I want to ask you, the listener, which one are you?
That is the ultimate question.
Because the only difference really is the nature of the life inside you. It's not about how tall you stand or how green your leaves are. It's about the seed.
The source of life.
And consider the mercy of the delay. If you are sitting there thinking, I might be a weed or I'm not sure, remember that the only reason the fire hasn't fallen yet is that the master is waiting. The delay is an opportunity.
It is. It is a call to examine ourselves and to rest in the sower.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. This has been Reformed Thinking.
Until next time.